One morning, Cameron lies in bed next to Diana, and they confess their love for each other. Suddenly, he wakes up and is disappointed to realize that the romantic moment with his beloved was just a dream. Later, Cameron's parents, Hunter and Carol, argue about their son's future. Hunter believes Cameron should decide on his plans for the future, while Carol asks him not to pressure their son too much. At the ice cream cafe where Cameron works, assistant manager Lenny reprimands him for being late and tells him to close the cafe that night. Cameron tries to explain that he has a date with Diana, but Lenny doesn't believe that he could be dating such a beauty. Meanwhile, a mysterious woman appears near the house of Cameron's neighbor. On the same day, Cameron's co-worker, Liz, is angry that she has to close the cafe that night and also doesn't believe in Cameron's date with Diana. Cameron explains that he has been friends with Diana for many years, and he was the first person she texted when she returned to town from college. After work, Cameron goes to Diana's house, where he sees her sunbathing in a bikini. Suddenly, bullies Chad and Jason appear, accusing Cameron of spying on Diana and secretly taking pictures of her, then throwing his phone onto the road. Diana appears at the noise, and Cameron claims he wasn't spying on her and is about to prove it, but his phone gets run over by a car. Diana seems to believe him and tells the bullies to leave, and Cameron leaves too. In the evening, Cameron accidentally sees through the window how neighbor Victoria undresses, but she immediately notices him, making him hide. At dinner, Hunter says he won't buy his son a new phone because he should have stood up to the bullies. Suddenly, there is a knock on the door, and Cameron, terrified, sees Victoria through the peephole, but when the embarrassed guy opens the door, only Diana is on the doorstep. They go to a pizzeria to grab a bite, where Diana apologizes for causing Cameron to lose his phone. Seeing his friend Martin, Cameron calls him over, though Diana asks him not to. Noticing Diana, Martin becomes embarrassed and leaves. On the way home, Diana finally reveals the reason. It turns out Martin inexplicably dumped her at prom. Cameron is very surprised and says he would never leave such a beauty. Then Diana recalls the night when Cameron came to her house and they drank her father's alcohol together. She says that she was going to tell him something she had never told anyone before, but he fell asleep. Suddenly, Cameron sees Victoria again and hurries back home. When he runs into his room, Victoria mysteriously appears right behind him. Cameron immediately starts apologizing for spying, as he usually sees elderly Miss Carpenter in the neighboring window. Victoria says she will be living with the woman for a while and demands that Cameron drive her around town for a few days as punishment for spying. He says he hasn't paid the car insurance, but the girl insists that it's his problem. Later, Cameron has to take Victoria to an office building, where she takes his car keys so he can't leave without her. The security guard lets Victoria inside, and Cameron goes to the building after waiting in the car for half an hour. Suddenly, the bloody security guard runs out, begging for help. Cameron panics and runs back to the car, where he sees Victoria attacking the guard and coldly killing him by sucking his blood. Cameron realizes in horror that Victoria is a vampire, and she says he will have to drive her if he wants to live, then passionately kisses him goodbye. The next day, Hunter notices blood on the car, and Victoria conveniently explains that it was from a deer that suddenly jumped out. She also says she'll pay for Cameron's insurance if he drives her around, and Hunter sees nothing wrong with this, much to his son's disappointment. Later, Martin confesses that he left Diana at prom because he didn't know how to behave with such a beauty. He even asks his friend to convince Diana to give him another chance. That night, Cameron waits in the car while Victoria goes into a building, and a few minutes later, a lifeless body falls onto the car. Victoria soon returns, greedily licking blood from her fingers, and Cameron washes the blood off the car on the way home. A few hours later, the vampire unexpectedly appears in bed next to Cameron, deciding to tell him why she is in town. It turns out she is 247 years old, and in 1890, a hostile vampire clan killed her lover because he refused to join them. Over the past 100 years, most of the hostile vampires moved to America, and now Victoria is tracking them down to kill them all. Cameron is relieved to learn that the neighbor was killing vampires, not humans. The next day, Martin asks Cameron to go on a date with him and Diana because he is too nervous, and later, Lenny is surprised to see Cameron and Diana talking sweetly. In the evening, Victoria says she will kill one of the last enemies today, after which she needs to find their evil leader, who killed her lover. Despite Victoria's order to stay in the car, Cameron still follows her into the building. Soon they find the enemy, who shoots several times, and Cameron falls to the floor. Victoria rushes at the enemy and kills him with a strong bite to the neck. After this, Cameron gets up, admitting to his companion that he is not wounded and fell to the floor only to distract the enemy's attention. Before parting, Cameron asks Victoria to appear at Martin and Diana's date, so he has an excuse to leave. The next day, Liz invites Cameron to watch her friend's band perform the next evening, but he politely declines. On the date, Cameron breaks the awkward silence by saying that Martin really wants to play baseball professionally. As soon as Diana goes to the restroom, Victoria appears and calls Cameron to go with her. Outside, Cameron confesses to Victoria that he has been in love with Diana for several years, just like Martin. Cameron explains that he deliberately wants Diana to spend some time with Martin and finally realize how boring he is. In the evening, Cameron shows Victoria the bullies Chad and Jason, who constantly tease him. The girl deliberately provokes Chad to hit Cameron, then teaches her companion a few strong blows so he can finally stand up for himself. Cameron bravely approaches Chad and punches him in the ribs, making him double over in pain, after which the bullies finally agree to leave him alone. In the car, Cameron complains about the severe pain in his wrist after the punch, and Victoria gives him a small bottle of liquid to drink. The vampire confesses that it's her blood, which will help quickly heal all human wounds but won't turn him into a vampire. At night, as Cameron dreams about Diana, Victoria appears in his bed and begins passionately kissing him to make Diana jealous. Hunter unexpectedly enters the room but immediately leaves after seeing what's happening on the bed. However, Cameron still stops the vampire, not wanting to betray Diana and hoping to win her love. In the morning, Hunter winks understandingly at his son at the table. Later, Martin confesses to his friend that last night's date after he left was just terrible, and Cameron replies that he probably won't succeed with Diana. Meanwhile, Victoria enters the vintage clothing store where Diana works. Cameron tells Liz about his complicated relationships with girls and finally agrees to watch her friend's band perform that evening. In the evening, Hunter gives his son a pack of condoms, and Cameron, about to go to the performance, suddenly notices Diana entering the neighbor's house. He immediately changes his mind about leaving and hurries home. Meanwhile, Liz can't wait for him near the concert venue. Cameron watches with intense jealousy from his window as Diana and Victoria kiss. Then they turn off the light and lie down together on the bed. In the morning, Cameron sees Diana leaving the neighbor's house. Victoria follows and asks with a smile if he liked the show. Cameron gets very angry and says he refuses to work for her, but the vampire grabs him by the shirt collar and says they will finish the job together. Later, Cameron suggests Martin go on another date with Diana, promising to help his friend. Then he goes to the cafe, where Liz slaps him for not coming to the concert last night. Cameron goes to the vintage clothing store, where Diana tells him that Martin has invited her on another date. On the same day, Carol gives her son a new phone but asks him not to tell his father yet. Later, Cameron tells Martin to wear an earpiece with a microphone on the date so he can help his friend if necessary. On the date, Cameron listens to the couple's entire conversation, after which a satisfied Diana gives Martin the car keys to take her wherever he wants. Cameron tells his friend to take her home, but he refuses and drives her to a secluded place. Annoyed, Cameron follows the couple and sees from behind a tree how Diana whispers something into the earpiece, then throws it out the window, meaning she knew about the earpiece all along. Suddenly, Diana bites Martin on the neck, revealing that she is also a vampire. Upset, Cameron goes to the cafe to see Liz, but she isn't there. Soon, Diana appears, and Cameron recoils from her, thinking she killed his friend. The girl shows Martin alive in the car trunk and explains that she just made him stronger so he could play baseball professionally. Cameron feels betrayed as Diana hid from him for years that she was a vampire. The girl confesses she loves Cameron and was afraid of losing him if he found out the truth. Diana regretfully says she has lived for several centuries, and everyone she ever loved died of old age, and she doesn't want the same to happen to Cameron. Cameron forgives the girl, and they kiss, while Lenny secretly watches them from around the corner. In the evening, Victoria tells Cameron she didn't know Diana was a vampire until she looked at her more closely. It turns out Diana is a member of the hostile vampire clan Victoria is hunting, and now Cameron will serve as bait for her. Sensing that Cameron is in danger, Diana comes to his house. Suddenly, Lenny jumps out from behind a tree, says he knows who she is, and threatens to tell everyone the truth. Then Diana throws him to the ground and drinks his blood. A few minutes later, Diana and Martin burst into the house to see Victoria holding Cameron hostage. The two vampires engage in a fierce fight. Victoria attacks Diana with a knife, but she defends herself with a tray and takes the lead in the fight. Pinning her opponent to the floor, Diana explains that 100 years ago, their leader became incredibly cruel and she wanted to escape from him. She then met Victoria's lover, who told her she would be safe in their clan and even gave her his blood. However, her heartless leader found out about this and killed Victoria's lover. Upon learning the truth, Victoria apologizes and forgives Diana. The two vampires decide to form their own new clan. Diana says a warm goodbye to a saddened Cameron, explaining that he has a whole life ahead of him. Diana kisses Cameron goodbye, and the newly turned vampire Lenny appoints Liz as the new assistant manager of the cafe and leaves with the vampires. The next day, Cameron tells his parents he wants to write a book about vampires. Returning to the cafe, Cameron tells Liz his incredible story. She doesn't believe her colleague, but still lets him into the cafe.